What was the question of Rabbi Yudin on Reish Lakish? He asked the following. We have a statement of Rabbi Chia that seems to contradict Rabbi Yudin, and that is that if Reuven dies without children and Shimon is miyavim, the wife of Reuven, and then Shimon dies without children, Levi is miyavim, the wife of Shimon. And the Yushalmi, Rabbi Yudin, doesn't see the difference between Yibum and Chalitza. Just like Reish Lakish applied in the case of Chalitza, the rule that Chalitza now engenders an Isa Karis of Achos of Eshes Achim on all the other brothers, so too the Yibum, in this case of Shimon, of the wife of Reuven, should engender like Chalitza. In other words, Shimon had two options. He could have been Choletz, the wife of Reuven, or he could be Miyabba. He chose to be Miyabba. That should have the same identical repercussions as if he had chosen to be Choletz. And that would remove the Nefila for Yibum to the other brothers. And the other brothers now should go back into the state of Eshes Achim. How can Rabbi Chia say that now Levi is Miyabim, the wife of Shimon, who in turn was the wife of Reuven? How could that be? Levi, now, because Shimon was the one who opted to be Miyabim Eshes Reuven, now Levi, like the case of Chalitza Reish Lakish, should be included in Iser Eshes Ach vis-a-vis the wife of Reuven. And the Yushalmi gives an answer, which you'll see on the third line down from Pei Beis, that Eina Dome Yibum L'Chalitza. We're going to make a fundamental distinction here, according to Yushalmi, between Yibum and Chalitza. Okay, how is that so? I'm just here too. Sorry. Mishum, and here we're going to apply the logic that we always applied. Again, we were never comfortable with this, but nobody seems to offer an alternative. The logic of Reish Lakish is L'Mafreya, that once Shimon is Choletz, the wife of Reuven, Igloi Milson Mafreya, that the other brothers, there was never in the field for Yibum, vis-a-vis the other brothers. I will be Yibum, Kishaba Aleh Echad Min Ha'achim V'Yibma, Harei Hi Ishta. A very ambiguous statement. The attempt or the success of the Yushalmi to distinguish between Chalitza and Yibum, just simply by saying that after one of the brothers, in this case Shimon, was Miyabim, the wife of Reuven, then Harei Ishta. Well, what does that mean, Harei Ishta? So we're now going to embark upon a little bit of a, shall I say, a project to understand this answer to the Yushalmi according to Reb Shimon Shkop. As I mentioned to you many times, he was one of the Lithuanian great, Rosh Yeshiva of the generation before the war. But before we do that, let's just think out loud. Harei hi ke'ishto. Gentlemen, would you want to jump in here to the rink, or I'll just say what I think should be on your mind? If I can read your minds.
I mean, to Levi, she's just the wife of Shimon.
Correct. Let's forget about ancient history. You're right that there was originally an Ichus to Reuven, which theoretically could generate, as far as Levi is concerned, an Isser of Eshes Ach, based on the question of Rabbi Yudin and Yushalmi and his analogy to the case of Chalitza. But once Shimon is Miyabim Eshes Reuven, the Ishus to Reuven is dead and buried. It's ancient history. We now have an Ishus to replace the original Ishus. And now Levi is only concerned with the Ishus between this woman and his brother Shimon, forgetting about the fact that she was once married to Reuven. Or Reb Shimon Shkop sees it in a much more sophisticated light. It's a very complex analysis. He asks a question which I I would be afraid to ask. It's like, you really have to be a revolutionary thinker and a real chutzpah yak to even raise this question. You want to know the following. A woman is married to Reuven, and Reuven dies. What generates the erva, the status of Eishes Ach, when he's no longer alive? We've been building castles in the sky about how Yibum is matir, the Isser erva of Eishes Ach. Why not just say simply, there is no longer an Isser Eishes Ach? But in truth, we know there is. In fact, if there was no Yibum, let's say, for example, if Reuven dies and leaves children, then the halacha is that his wife is an Eishes Ach as far as all the other brothers are concerned. And Reb Shimon still wants to appeal to our intuitive sense that, well, she's not Eishes Ach. If the brother's not alive anymore, why is she still considered Eishes Ach? So he comes up with a wild thesis that the original issues between, let's call her Sarah and Reuven, continues to exist even after Reuven's death. We're not talking about Zika. You follow? There's no Yibum, period. Again, what I'm about to say is not Reb Shimon, but maybe we could say it this way, that just like in the case of Yibum, if Reuven died childless, the issues between his wife Sarah and Reuven continues posthumously after Reuven's death in the form of Zikas Yibum, then even in a case where there is no Zikas Yibum, the Torah is machadish that there's an issues to, right? Let's say we'll talk to Shimon, we're addressing Shimon. Shimon, you should know that Sarah is still considered Eishes Reuven, your brother. Obviously, that can't be so, because she's allowed to marry any man on the face of the earth. If you're going to tell me she's still Bishlev, in the case of Yibum, Enochinami Zika generates an Isser on the entire world. And Steve and I are learning a later parak in Masechet Yevamot, and we know that according to Rav, if a man from the shuk would be married, it's Ein Kedushin Tofsid, even though it's only Chai B'Lavin, but she's considered like married to the late brother. But in a case where there is no Yibum, and Reuven dies leaving children, for example, why is anyone other than the brothers allowed to marry her? If you're telling me that Eishes Ach means that the original issues between Sarah and Reuven still exists, it persists, even after the death of Reuven, then how could anybody marry her? So this is going to be Reb Shimon's challenge. How do you balance the following two? They seem like contradictory principles. On the one hand, you want to assume that even after Reuven dies, Sarah is still considered the wife of Reuven. On the other hand, you're going to say that anyone on the face of the earth, other than the brothers, can marry this woman. And Rav Shimon is going to press the button of relative issues, which sounds crazy, but we've already seen in the past precedents to this concept of relative issues. For example, in the case of Get Al Tanai, a man divorces his wife, and yet she chutz mi ploni, you can't marry this guy. In other words, as far as this guy's concerned, you're still married to me, even after I deliver a get. But as far as the rest of the belt is concerned, you're considered a grusha, and anyone can marry. So we see this concept already of relative issues. She can be considered an H vis-a-vis so-and-so, in this case, most of the world, but not vis-a-vis this guy. And then we had a whole discussion. What happens if she falls for Yibum to this guy? Is there an Erev of Eishes Ish? So let's see this inside. This is like wild. Beer Reb Shimon Shkapik Avodas Yushalmi Teirut. So Yesh Lach. B'chol Iser Eishes Ach. Af Liachar Mosam. We know that Eishes Ach applies even after Reuben dies. So you can't marry your sister-in-law after your brother dies. Unless there's a mitzvah Yibum, right? Ha'im Gzeres HaKosav Isha Kolcha Hoitza Sha'achas Eishes Ach. Arehi asura olav li'olam. In other words, you can have a cause for an Isur Erva. You can remove that cause, but the Isur Erva still continues. So, for example, in the case of Achos Ishto, the reason why you can't marry her is because she's the wife of she's the sister of your wife. Once you remove that cause and your wife dies, you can marry her. She's no longer the sister of your wife. But in the case of Eishes Ach, the Torah says that since she was an Erva, she remains an Erva. In other words, now we're saying that Eishes Ach, that Achos Ishto is the exception to the rule, rather than the rule. The rule is that once she has the status of an Erva, she's stamped as an Erva for you for the rest of time, for all eternity. Even if the original reason to generate that Isur Erva was removed. He says that's one way of understanding why Eishes Ach as an Erva persists even after his death. Oh, Dilma. Now he has a second passage. Shalo nifka ishuso legamri. That even after Reuven dies, he's still married to his wife. I mean, think about that, Ramos. That's pretty wild. I mean, you're looking at him. You come to visit a cemetery, right? And this is a Goyish minhag, not Jewish, but you put flowers on the kever. We put stones on the kever because that's a Masechet Yevamot. But he's dead and buried, and his wife is still his wife. I mean, it just doesn't stim. It doesn't make sense. The dead are not married. And the Mishnah at the beginning of Kiddushin says so in so many words, right? Has it say kones atzmim shtei drachim beged v'misas haba? So he's gone, and she's no longer married to him. No. She's still married to him. Almost like Yibum, where we said that the Zika continues that Ishus even after his death. But now we're not talking about Zika's Yibum. Umashi muteres l'chol adam. The Torah took this Ishus and made it into a relative Ishus. Bishum shelo osra Torah Ishus kazu. The Torah didn't prohibit that Ishus. Be'isur Eishes Ish. It doesn't reach that high tier level of being Eishes Ish. There is Ishus, but it's not Eishes Ish. I would ask you, would you want to marry this woman? And when I talk about this woman, I'm talking about any almana. Why marry an almana when she's still married to a former husband? And I'll prove to you that she's still married to a former husband because she cannot marry his brother. Why can't the brother marry her? Because she's still married to his late brother. So why do you want to marry her? Oh, don't worry about it. It's only a mixed issues. She's only partially married to the man who's buried, a former husband. Well, she's a little bit married to him. Yeah, I don't know. I don't feel comfortable marrying such a woman. I don't know. But that's what Rav Shimon Shkop says it. In order to generate the status of an Erev of Eishes Ach, Sagi be Eishes Kazu. So if Eishes is on a scale of 0 to 100, then once a husband dies, it reduces down to 50. She's 50% married, on a scale of 0 to 50% married to the late husband. That 50% is enough of an Eishes to generate Eishes Ach, but not Eishes Ish. It's an abstract mind, too. I mean, Hichriya, Reb Shimon Shkop, again, we don't have the original. He says you can find it in Chidusha, Reb Shimon Shkop, Simon Yutes. He has proofs that the second side is correct. Kitzad Hasheni, that she still remains married even after the death of her husband, and that's enough to generate an Erev of Eishes Ach. So it's not pshat that because she was an Eishes Ach, she continues to be an Eishes Ach. Al Pizeh, now he understands the difference between Chalitza and Yibum in Rabbi Yudin in the Yushalmi. HaChalitza eina mafkia es Ishus HaMes. Right? Chalitza does not have the power to remove the Ishus. V'adayin hi mamshicha lesar liosra al ha'ach. That's Reish Lakish, who says that she's an Isser Eishes Ach on the other Ach after Chalitza. Avol b'yibum nases hi ke'Eishes hamiyabe umafkia l'gamrei es Ishes hames bimeno. Oh, that part we had on our own before we saw Reb Shimon. V'alkein eina achav asurim achmasa li'achar sheyibem hashem. I don't understand this. Why did Reb Shimon need this whole sophisticated presentation? Why not just say simply that Chalitza does not remove the issues, whereas Yibum does remove the issues? That seems to be black. That seems to be very smooth and straightforward. What is bothering Reb Shimon that he needs this? Chalitza does not remove issues. See, I think what's going on here, if I can sort of analyze the mind of Reb Shimon, what's in his brain, he believes that in order to solve this problem with Yerushalmi, you must first create a framework in which the issues of a brother, as far as Eishes Ach and an Erev is concerned, continues even posthumously. Only once you've created that framework, now you could zoom in on this case of Yibum and differentiate between Chalitza and Yibum. Meaning, once you've established and you've accepted this principle that the issues continues even posthumously as far as the Achim of it, now ask yourself the question in the situation of Yibum. So first we go to the general question of issues after death for Eishes Ach when there is no Yibum. And then, we have this kind of broad scope, and now we can reduce our focus to the specific case where there is Yibum. Fine. So now Reuven dies, leaving Sarah, and is Yibum. Shimon has two options: Chalitza or Yibum. So what does the Torah say? Chalitza does not remove that issue. And basically, in that sense, we're going back to Eishes Ach, meaning classic Eishes Ach, without Yibum. Classic Eishes Ach without Yibum, there's issues that generates Eishes Ach. And that continues even in the case of Yibum, if the Yavam, one of the brothers, opts for Chalitza. And that's Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish is saying to us that just like in general, Eishes Ach as an Ereva persists posthumously. By the way, when I use that term posthumously, am I using a right word? Okay, good, because that saves me a few extra words. So too, in Yibum, that's in Zikas Yibum, the field Yibum that's followed by Chalitza, that issues of Eishes Ach continues posthumously. Chalitza does not change the erva of Eishes Ach. Right, but I'm waiting for that, Jeff. I just want to digest it a little bit more of a punch. Trying. Why is it that Chalitza? Like obviously this is Reish Lakish, but why is it that Chalitza does not remove that issues? I mean, intuitively, I would have said just the opposite. See, I think what he's saying here, tell me if this makes sense. If Reuven during his lifetime would have delivered a get to Sarah, well, that doesn't work out because the Easter Ashes. Right. So it means that whether Reuven dies or delivers a get to his wife, in both cases, there's still a residue of his issues. And how does that express itself? In the Easter Erev of Eishas. So Shimon can't marry Sarah, neither if Reuven dies, nor if Reuven divorces his wife. Is that correct? I hope that's good. If I'm wrong, I have to do tshuva before Rosh Hashanah. Chalitza is like get. The difference is that chalitza achieves vis-a-vis zika what a get achieves vis-a-vis full-fledged issues. And in both cases, the Torah says, the way Reb Shimon understands it, that the issues, as far as issues ach, the other achim are concerned, still persists. Do you follow what I'm trying to add here? I'm just trying to embellish Reb Shimon by saying that chalitza should be seen in the light of the precedent of get. Just like we have gerushin, but yet the Easter Eichesach persists even after gerushin, so too in a situation of yibum, the issues of Eichesach persists even after chalitza. But now the Yavam, one of the brothers, opts for yibum. Now we're up to Jet. So what do you say in the case of yibum? Ishus is gone, right? So let's try to analyze that. See, because Yibum, as opposed to Chalitza, get the words out here. It's Chalitza just creates a matir on issues, but ops for issues. Again, we're back to the old replacements. I'm trying to see if we can do a little bit better. Because in a certain sense, Yibum works in the opposite direction of Chalitza. Like two polar extremes at the end of, because Chalitza is geared towards removing issues, and it does remove issues. So Raya, now she can marry anyone else. Just like in Get, she can marry anyone. But then you ask yourself the question, how powerful is either a get or a chalitza? How far-reaching is its arm? Its powerful arm. Can it remove the issues completely or not? And then we could say, well, when you're talking about an action that's the goal of which is to remove issues, how far and how powerful is that action? And the Torah could say, well, vis-a-vis, the issues that I need for an Erev Meishasach, it's not powerful enough. There's still a vestige of the original issues. But in the case of Yibum, we're saying just the opposite. We're not looking for a removal of issues, but rather we're looking for establishing issues. And now we're going to say that when Shimon is miyavim Sora Eshes Reuven, what he does is he's converting what was mixas issues, namely zik, but that's vis-a-vis the world, and vis-a-vis other brothers, he takes Ashes up. He takes Ishus in general, forget about Ashes up, and jacks it up from 50% to 100%. And now, as a result of Yibum, she's a full-fledged Ashes Ish. You see where Chalitza and Yibum are like pulling at what's it called, a rope, pulling from two sides, rope. Because Chalitza, like get, is geared towards the goal of removing Ishus. Ishus now is taking whatever mixes Ishus and jacking it up. But on the other hand, you have to ask yourself the following question. How can you possibly take the Ishus of Ruvain to Sarah and jack it up? You can't do that because Ruvain is dead. It would be antithetical, it would be anti-logical to assume that when Shimon is miyabim Ashes Ruvain, that Ishus that he's created is going to resurrect the dead. We're not ready for Tfias HaMesim. We have to say that she's an Ashes Ish to Ruvain the deceased. And yet, we're saying that the mixas issues that remained after Ruvain's death has now been jacked up to a full-fledged. So how do you juggle this? On the one hand, we're saying that Yibum is upgrading a mixas issues to an isha shlema gmura. But on the other hand, we're saying you can't do that vis-a-vis the issues of Ruben because Ruben's dead. So that issues is frozen. You're not, after Tchias HaMesim, he could be married his original wife. No, that's an interesting question. Who will be married to after Tchias HaMesim? Who she'll be married to? But anyway, that's not relevant now because he's dead. And that issues is frozen. It cannot develop. What does it mean, therefore, that Shimon is miyame and creates a full-fledged ishus? It's got to be an ishus between Sarah and Shimon. And I'll prove it to you. If man would have a relationship now with Sarah, he's chayav misa feishes ish. Not chayav misa feishes ish and Ruben. That can only be Yevamot Ashuk, and he's a lot. But here he's going to get, misa's bez. So we see clearly that she's a full-fledged Ashes Ishta Shimon. Wait a minute, so how does this work? Does this work? What? Yeah, I wanted to listen. I got to. Yeah. I know we're making some progress, but I'm not there yet.
I want to complicate it further. If Reuben doesn't have children and he divorces, that's not a situation.
No.
But if he then after the divorce, it's still not a situation because the get has completely severed his imago, as you said.
If I read you correctly, you're asking the following question: how could it be that if Reuven divorces his wife Sarah and then he dies, Sarah doesn't fall for Yibum, even though he died childless? I mean, after all, after the get, there was still issues to the brothers for an Erev relationship of Ashes Ab. Why don't we apply Yibum? So I think the answer to that question is that, just 1 second, that that get removes the mitzvah. You have to keep in mind, Jeff, that the Zika relation is relevant to the entire world. Again, in the case where he didn't divorce, I was saying the Shirayim of Ishus, if I could use that term, vis-a-vis Ishus should not be identified with Zika Simum. They're two fundamentally different concepts. Zika Simum is relevant to the entire world. She now is the Yevamot Ashuk for the entire world. So whereas, according to Rav Shimon Shkar, even after death or Gerish, where Ruvain delivered a wife to get to his wife Sarah, there still is issues vis-a-vis the Achim for the Erev of Eishes Ach. Right? But as far as some sort of issues vis-a-vis the entire world, to achieve that goal, and if there's no mitzvah of Yibum, the get completely remove that issues. Now, in a case where he did not divorce his wife, but he died childless, then the Zika represents an issues relationship to the deceased that has an impact on the entire world. But I'm still trying to figure out why the Yibum of one of the brothers, why does that remove the Shirayim of Ishus to Reuven? So we're saying that in the case of Chalitza is only relevant to remove the Ishus that impacts on the entire world, like a get. But like a get, it doesn't remove the Ishus that generates the Erev of Eishes Ach. That's okay. But if, on the other hand, he opts for Yibum, now we're going in the opposite direction. And instead of removing whatever vestige of Ishus is to be the whole world, it does not remove the Ishus, like again, it does not remove the Ishus to the Achim. And that level of Ishus still remains in place. But that's only because of what? Of Chalitza. So Chalitza moves the Ishus that's common to the whole world. Still remain with the Ishus that's specific vis-a-vis the Ach of Eishes Ach. Now get to Yibum. Yibum is, in its very essence, is antithetical to Chalitza, because instead of removing Ishus, it creates an Eishes Ish. If somebody has a relationship with her now after Yibum, he'll be condemned for death. So we see that Yibum now creates Ishus. But wait a minute, what happens with the Ishus? I think where Shim might be saying, I don't know, maybe this is simple, and I just went around, took me an hour to go back to home plate, to the easiest, simplest sentence. And that is that if you're talking about creating issues through Yibum, which means issues for Kuli Alma, for the whole world, then at that point she cannot be considered an Eishes Isha, two different men. And then basically we're coming back to the old hack that the new Ishus replaces the old Ishus. But I think, I don't know, maybe I'm negative, but I think we've gained a little bit of an insight.
I mean, the other part would be if Shimon dies and she falls for Yibum again, she's actually falling for Yibum vis-a-vis Reuven. Because Shimon
Reuven is deceased?
They're deceased. Because Shimon didn't have any children either, so he didn't extend his brother's lineage. So it's up to the next brother to still extend Reuven.
Wait, I don't understand. I'm confused. Are you saying that Levi now has a responsibility to extend Reuven's lineage?
Yeah.
Oh, Wait a minute, but when you started, I thought you were saying that she somehow falls for Yibam to Reuven.
No.
Yeah.
So I mean, Shimon, he didn't help.
He didn't do what.
He didn't
accomplish his goal because he died without children.
Yeah, I mean, it's still.
That's a good point.
So
I didn't think of that.
If it goes back.
But now you're creating problems. You're not solving.
Wow.
No, I just want to know whose team are you on? Are you coming to answer or to ask? That's all.
I think doesn't that help answer that there's still.
No, but we want to get rid of Reuven. No offense. I mean, again, my heart goes out for you. But the Yerushalmi is trying to explain why doesn't Levi have an Eishes Ach problem vis-a-vis Sarah's relationship to Reuven? Well, which he has in a general case where his brother dies. Let's say there is no Yibum. He has a problem with Eishes Ach because she's still attached to the issues of Reuven. It sounds to me like you're exacerbating the kasha Rabbi Yudin because, again, the logical conclusion the conclusion to your logic would be, on the contrary, that Levi should be Mivyavim Eishes Reuven. And we're trying to come to the exact opposite conclusion because if you're going to say that Levi is being Mivyavim Eishes Reuven, so then what about the Erev of Eishes Ach? Which again, according to Reish Lakish, that Erev of Eishes Ach was always there. When Reuven dies, again, what Shimon does is fine, but as far as Levi is concerned, Levi is stuck with Eishes Ach of Reuven. And that was Rabbi Yudin's kash in the Yerushalmi. How could Levi possibly be B'yavim Eishes Reuven? And he came up with this thesis that's a difference between Shimon giving Chalitza and Shimon being B'yavim. But now you're saying, well, Kol HaKavod to Shimon for being B'yavim. We were applauding his efforts, but they were futile. He died without children, so he never was actually. What was the word the Torah uses? Lahakim shem lezera achim ames, right? I mean, your point is 100% correct. I can't deny it. Shimon was a failure, not for any reason of his own. He didn't commit suicide. You know what I'm saying? He died. That was a divine decision. It wasn't in his hands. But I don't want to resurrect Reuven from the dead and say that now Sarah falls for even to Levi because Shimon failed to do what he had to do to achieve that goal. And therefore, Sarah, is that last opportunity to continue the Zerah of Reuven. And therefore, she now falls for even to Levi as a result of Reuven, because then you're going to come to the kasha of Rabbi Yudin. And that is that Reish Lakish's logic in the case of Chalitza should apply to a case of Yibum as well. Shimon that's Reish Lakish. Is Kamo Chaim Yesh Liyaser Olav, meaning on Levi Mishum Eishes Ach. Could be that Rav Shimon is saying something a little bit different. He's weighing on the scale again, Ishus. Mm. So you've got the Ishus of Reuven Leachar Moso, and now you have the Ishus of Shimon after Yibum. And if you weigh those two on a scale, then clearly the Ishus of Shimon outweighs the Ishus of Reuven, because Reuven is only a Mixas Ishus. And anyone who would have a relationship with it would not be guilty of Eishes Ish, whereas Shimon's Yibum now creates a full-fledged Ish. And now he's weighing the two, and he's saying, once we outweigh the Ishus of Reuven, it's completely gone. But again, it's still a little bit of a problem because we're talking about two different, when you put two different Ishuses on a scale, they have to be somewhat comparable. The Ishus of Reuven is a whole different type of Ishus. It's an Ishus vis-a-vis the Erev of Eishes Ach. How did that dissipate into thin air simply because Shimon was miyabing Sarah? So imagine Sarah, if you want to picture it visually in your mind. Here's Sarah, right? And now you have Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. This woman, Sarah, was married to Reuven and married to Shimon. Obviously not simultaneously, but the bottom line is she was married to both Reuven and Shimon. Now, if there's a principle according to Rav Shimon Shkab, that even after death, as far as the Erev of Eishes Ach, there's still Ishus, then she's got a status of Ishtoshel Reuven and Ishtoshel Shimon, because death doesn't do us part, according to Rav Shimon. So therefore, when we talk about Levi and his relationship to Sarah, you have vibes coming from Reuven and vibes coming from Shimon. So it's very nice that Shimon's death should engender a mitzvah of Yibum to Levi by virtue of the fact that Sarah is Ashes Shimon. But what are you going to do with the fact that Sarah is also Ashes Reuven? And that Erev of Ashes Reuven, as we saw in Reish Lakish, is still viable. Because if Shimon had given Chalitza to Ashes Reuven, she would be an Erev of Ashes Reuven, meaning Ashes Ach, vis-a-vis Levi. So why not say the same thing happens after Yibum? Unless you're going to come up with this super svara that the Ishus that generates Ashes Ish from Reuven after Reuven's death now is, as we said before, replaced or overwhelmed by the Ishus to Shimon. So that when Shimon dies, there's going to be Yibum. Anyway, it's a pretty challenging, mental gymnastics here. This from Shimon Shkal. Now, on the left column, the second paragraph says Achabaha. Do you remember that? That we got up to that? Abaha kosa b'shitas Reish Lakish. שאף על גב של עניין היתר הצורוס לשוק, אנו אומרים שהוא חולץ ליחס מהצורוס, הרי זה כאילו חולץ לשתיהן, meaning that Rivka does not need chalitza to marry someone from the shuk. It's enough that her Sarah received chalitza. Aval in aptur mikares, ein omrim ki ilu choltu kol ha'achim kol atzaros. That's a quote from the Baha, Baal Halachas Gedolos, one of the Rishonim. He tells you that you can find it in Hilchas Eidos. Okay. Mashma midvarov, this is getting Rav Elchanan is talking about. Shelo nechlak Reish Lakish al kach shetam heter kol atzaros l'shuk al yidei chalitza achas anu l'shum shlichus. Right, we've always said, and we've repeated this point many times, that it's Rabbi Yochanan who comes up with the idea of shlichus, as if to say that all the achim participated, implemented this chalitza. And if the Torah reduces the erva after chalitza from a kares of Eishes Ach down to a lav, that applies to all the achim equally and to all the tzaras equally. But now we're saying that even Reish Lakish agrees and embraces the concept of shlichus, but only a relative shlichus, only a partial shlichus. When we talk about tzaros, heter tzaros l'shuk, that the tzara after one of the wives got chalitza, she can marry anyone in the shuk, then we introduce shlichus. But as far as the P'tur Kares is concerned, We're not going to plush. Well, what's he saying? It sounds like we're being cheated here a little bit. No? Do you feel cheated? I mean, he's telling you that even Reish Lakish accepts shlichus. Araya, the tzara is allowed to marry anyone from the shuk. I mean, she didn't get chalitza, but there's a shlichus operating here that the chalitza to what do we call a tzara relates to Rivka as well. And now Rivka can marry anyone from the shuk. But Reish Lakish says that as far as all the brothers are concerned, there's an Isakaris. As far as the tzara will call a Rivka, there's an Isakaris. But what happened to shlichus? I feel like they pulled the wool over my head. All I get here is lodai b'svar zu. But somehow shlichus is not defective. Lodai. We can't add this to Dayenu on Leil Pesach. Lodai b'svar zu. See, if the Bahag would have applied the Lumafreya business, that the underlying logic of Reish Lakish is that that the other brothers and the other tzaros didn't fall for Yibum at all, which puts them back into Eichasaf. That's Reish Lakish. So then, I don't know if the Bahag needs to say that the shlichus. Forget about shlichus. The reason why the Tzoras HaChalutza is allowed to marry anyone is because she never fell for you. He's refusing to apply the principle of Lamafreya. He's coming up with a whole new explanation of shlichus. That the Chalitza, although physically it was done to Sarah, but nevertheless, Al-Pidin, through shlichus, through the mechanism of shlichus, it's as if Sarah was the shliach of Rivka. That's why she's allowed to marry anyone from the shuk. But now the problem is, if you're going to operate with chalitzas, why should there be a difference between the choletz and the other brothers as far as the Sakaris is concerned? And that's Rabbi Yochanan. But what is Reish Lakish? How does he counter against that logic? I mean, the mechanics of it, without understanding the logic behind it, is that there's something called a shem chalutza. As far as the halacha of being matir the zika, the act of chalitza itself can generate that heter for all the different tzara, all the tzaras. But as far as the shem chalutza is concerned, she doesn't have a shem chalutza. In other words, shlichus doesn't mean that she actually got chalitza. She didn't get chalitza. The shlichus means that when what's her name, Sarah, is involved in chalitza, she represents all the other wives of the late husband. In order to engender a heter on Yevamot Lashuk. But as to create a shem chalutza, you need a maisa chalutza, that she received the chalitza. When she actually does the chalitza, she removes his now. But I mean, say the chalitza was begufa. that doesn't lend itself to shlichus. And the halacha of kares, according to Reish Lakish, is the halacha in the shem chalutza, the actual physical reality of chalitza. Again, we don't understand the logic of it, but what the Torah was machadish is that inherent in the Maisa Chalitza is a reduction of the Iser Eshesah. This has had anything to do whatsoever with Reb Shimon Shkop, but I was wondering if we could somehow connect it to Reb Shimon Shkop. But what was Reb Shimon's breakthrough? That even after the death of the husband, there still is a vestige of his issues that generates an erev of Eishes Av. So shlichus could not remove vis-a-vis the choleitz. I'm going to say that the issues of Eishes Av is removed. Chalitza certainly accomplishes that. That's not going to help the other tsaros. Why is it that only in the Maisa Chalitza, then we're saying that it removes the Iser Erev of Eishes Ach? That issue meaningful. So again, there are two dinim in chalitza. Tell me if this makes sense. According to Reb Shimon Shkop, chalitza has to accomplish two goals. Goal number one is to remove zikas ibum vis-a-vis the Welt, the whole world, which means that's in Hilchus Ichus and Kol HaTarku. And that chalitza is absolutely successful, 100%. But then chalitza has to accomplish another goal. And here, apparently, it's not, right, it's not totally successful. It has to remove the vestige of her relationship to the late husband, meaning the Erev of Eishes Av. And here, chalitza is not totally successful. It's partially successful. And what will determine its level of success? It would be the Maisa Chalitza, for some reason. The physical act of Chalitza, that she received Chalitza, she has a shame Chalutza, and vis-a-vis her, the issues to the brother to generate an Erev Eishes Ach is gone. But why is it only to her, not to the others? Because but one thing I do gain. So we asked, he was pulling the wool over our eyes, this Bahag, because he's telling me that there is shlichus, even according to Reish Lakish. So if there is shlichus, then the tzara should have the same status as the chalutza as far as removing the Isra Eishes Av. So that I think we can answer, because we could say that the chalitza has to accomplish two goals. And the shlichus is only operative vis-a-vis one of those two goals, to remove the ishus li'alma, as far as the vestige of ishus, which the Torah recognizes to generate an Isra Eishes Ach. There we're not going to operate with shlichus. Again, we can't explain why, but in terms of the mechanics of it, I think Rav Shimon would be helpful.
Issue of shlichus. If Sarah falls for Yibum, Shimon gives her chalitza, and then she marries Yehuda, not related at all. Yehuda gives her a gift. And she's able to marry Levi, one of the brothers, because that is not gone. And the Chalitza
Well,
accomplished.
no. It reduces it from an Issa Kares down to an Issa La. Yeah.
So
Because the Torah says Lo Yivne. And you know, Kavan Shalabana should Lo Yivne. That once he did Chalitza, he can no longer marry. But that's only a lot. You know, we remove the Erev of Eishes Ah.
can no longer marry. But his brother Levi has been off on the side the whole time. He can't marry her either.
Right. He, an Eishes Ah. Right. If the Choletz himself marries her, then it could be that we would recognize that marriage, you know, post fact. But if one of the other brothers who was not a Choletz, that's not, you know, it's not even a Hamam, or if one of the Tsaras would marry one of the brothers, according to Reish Lakish, it's not a Hamam meaning there to be any marriage because it's an Yitzer Erev of Eishes and Kedushin Tovs. So again, for Shlichus to operate, to remove the vestige of Ervas Eishes Ach, it's inoperative. And I'm just wondering if it's a reason why Shlichus could be effective vis-a-vis the Ishus Li'alma, but not vis-a-vis the Ishus to the Eishes Ach. I mean, you know, if I was just looking at this in a childish way, you know, very naively, I would say the following: that if Shimon opts for Chalitza, so Shimon becomes a good Samaritan. What do I mean? He is now allowing this Yevamah to marry anyone, and we're going to give him a prize for it. And the prize is that his Chalitza is going to remove the Erev Eishes Ach. But he doesn't deserve a prize. But that's only for the other Ach. What about for this? So he's operating on behalf of the whole bite. Which means that the Tzara marry anyone. But as far as removing the Isser Eishes Ach, that no, I'm not taking it. Okay, then. So I'm just wondering. I mean, obviously we want to move on, but back on Daf Ayin Ches, we had a Raj, and I have a note here that we never really finished up that Raj. That would take us back to the case of Tnai with a chutz, you know, where he gives her a get, with the exception of so-and-so. And then his brother marries her and dies without children, falling for Yibum to the one that was chutz. And the question is whether she needs chalitza. And apparently Yishalmi says she needs chalitza. And the question is, why does she need chalitza? Or if she's an Eishes Ish, so to the same extent that Yibum is knocked out of the possibility, so to chalitza. And he quotes a Rashba here on Daf Ayin Ches, in the next to last paragraph, that mitzad sfarz eina ni koriba kol sheina ol yibum eina ol chalitza. Normally we say if either there is yibum and then there's chalitza, or there's no requirement of chalitza. Here we're insisting on chalitza. And he says, Rashba, because it's not the erva that's preventing Yibum. It's rather the Tnai in the original Gerish. And we had a case also where Yibum was prevented because of a neder. We said chalitza is a requirement. So I'm just opening up the possibility that tomorrow I might, want to see this Rashba again, because I don't think we finished it. Other than that, we have more to do here on Pei Beis. Here, Machlokes Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish. Now you have Pei Gimel as well, right? That's where we'll. Oh, right. Tomorrow's Erev Rosh Hashanah. So this would be on Tzom Gedalia?
Probably just be on.
So save the energy, like calories. Doesn't help me much, but.
Well, if you don't want to eat, and you want to just stay home.
Believe it or not. No, it's not here or there. Let me try to explain, because I think it's important that you commensurate. Well, what's the word? What word am I looking for? No, there's an empathize. That's the word I'm looking for. Zoom without any physical bodies in the room is a killer for me. And I asked a few other people who are teaching on Zoom, and maybe they want to make me feel good, I don't know, but they sort of identify with my feelings. The psychology perhaps behind it is that when you're talking to a machine and there are faces there, if they turn on their computers or people listening, for some reason, because you don't see the face or you're not in the same room, you give it your kitchen. And my wife keeps telling me, control it. But I don't know, I haven't, like many of my impulses, I haven't learned how to control it. And I find that when I'm teaching totally on Zoom and there's not a live person in the room, the energy is like, I don't know if it's double, I don't know.
The whole around real people that you don't have on Zoom, and you have to fill that in your head.
Right.
And that's, I think,
there's some electricity if there are people sitting in the room, which
No, I'm
makes.
just saying for Thursday.
I'm just
saying if you didn't travel on Thursday to come
right. No,
here.
right. I'm just saying on Thursday, Mr. Hashem, we'll meet on Zoom.
and if we're going to be all on Zoom, there's no difference for you whether you're here or at home.
Well, no, because I have this Daf Yomi, so probably
You will be here.
yeah. Well, I'll ask the guys, but I'm assuming they're here anyway for davening, so they just come in.
Yeah.
And that makes it easier for me to give the Daf Yomi when the people are sitting.
So you want me to show you?
Yeah, let me just close this thing here. Wait a minute, we're closing this year, right? Closing this year.